The first snow came early that year. Thick, heavy flakes fell over the quiet coastal town of Seabrook, Oregon, turning the narrow streets into a watercolor of gray and white. Mara Bennett stood behind the counter of Harbor Brew Cafe, watching the world outside vanish into the storm. The cafe smelled like cinnamon and roasted beans, a smell that used to mean home. Before everything changed, she rubbed her chilled hands together, glancing at the open sign glowing faintly against the window. No customers. Again, just another slow winter day in a life that had become a waiting room. It used to be her father's place, Tom Bennett's Harbor Brew, the kind of spot where locals came for comfort, gossip, and jazz on Friday nights. Now it was hers, and the laughter, like her father, was gone. Bills piled higher than the foam on a cappuccino. Repairs were overdue, and the heater groaned like an old man trying to breathe. Still, she kept showing up, because that's what single mothers do. They keep showing up. The bell above the door jingled, startling her. She turned, expecting a gust of snow and nothing else. Instead, a man stepped inside. He was tall, wearing a dark wool coat dusted with snow. His hair was damp, his eyes tired, the kind of tired that came from somewhere deeper than sleepless nights. He looked around, like he'd stumbled into a memory he didn't expect to find. "Coffee," he said quietly. "Black." Mara blinked. "You got it." She poured the steaming brew and handed it to him. "Rough morning?" He offered a faint smile. "Rough few years. One of those days." He nodded, sitting near the window. One of those lives. He didn't say another word for half an hour. Just sat there, watching snow drift past the glass, holding his mug like it was the only warm thing left in his world. Mara tried to focus on wiping tables, organizing sugar packets, pretending she wasn't curious. But every few minutes she caught herself glancing over. He had that look, the quiet, haunted one, the same one she saw in the mirror some mornings. When he finally stood, he left a folded bill on the counter. "Keep the change," he said. She looked down a $50 bill. "That's way too much." She called after him. He stopped at the door. "Then make tomorrow better." And just like that, he stepped into the storm and disappeared. He came back the next morning, and the one after that, always the same seat, same order, same silence. Eventually, Mara started pouring his coffee before he arrived. The small act felt like ritual, a way to anchor something certain in her uncertain world. On the fifth morning, she finally said, "You know, most people order something fancier. Lattes, mocha, extra caramel, whipped air, whatever's trending." He smirked faintly. "Trends fade. Coffee doesn't." She laughed softly. "You sound like someone who's seen a few trends." He looked at her, really looked, and said quietly, "You could say that." There was weight behind the words, the kind that carried stories untold. She almost asked what happened, but the look in his eyes told her he wasn't ready to answer, and she wasn't sure she was ready to hear. That afternoon, the snow thickened. Most people stayed home, but he came anyway. Sat by the same window, coffee in hand, watching the same storm as she wiped the counter. Mara said, "You never told me your name." He hesitated, then said Daniel. "Daniel, what?" "Just Daniel." "All right, just Daniel," she teased. "I'm Mara, Mara Bennett." He smiled for the first time, a real smile, small but honest. "Nice to meet you, Mara Bennett." When closing time came, she noticed he was still there. You planning on camping here? She joked. He chuckled. I was waiting for the storm to ease up. Bad news, it's not stopping anytime soon. Then maybe I'll stay a while. And somehow, that didn't sound like a joke. By the time the lights dimmed and the snow outside swallowed the world whole, Mara realized something strange. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't thinking about bills or deadlines or everything she'd lost. She was just there, two people sitting quietly in the same storm, both trying to remember what warmth felt like by the end of that week. Everyone in town knew about the stranger in the Café Seabrook was small. Gossip spread faster than wind off the bay. People talked about the quiet man who drank black coffee and watched storms, like he was waiting for something that never came. But to Mara, he was just Daniel, the man who kept showing up. Every morning she'd unlock the door at 6. Every morning he was already there, sometimes clearing the snow off the porch, sometimes just standing with his hands in his pockets, watching the grey sky lift over the water. You're early again, she'd tease. I could say the same about you. Well, I own the place. He smiled. Maybe I just like watching people open doors. Deep, she said, pouring his usual. That's supposed to be metaphorical or just weird. Maybe both. On Tuesday, her son Jamie came to the cafe after school. A ball of 7-year-old energy with too many questions and not enough boundaries. Mum, look what I drew. He held up a crayon drawing of a house under a rainbow. That's beautiful, baby. Who's that? He asked, pointing at Daniel, who was sitting by the window with his usual mug. Just a customer, she said. Jamie marched over anyway. Hi, I'm Jamie. Daniel blinked, surprised. Hi, Jamie. I'm Daniel, Jamie cut in proudly. I heard Mum say it. You come here every day. That's weird, Mara groaned. Jamie? Daniel chuckled. It's okay. He's right. It is weird. Do you not have friends? Jamie asked bluntly. Daniel smiled faintly. Not the kind that make good coffee. Jamie thought about that, nodded seriously. Fair. That was how it started. Small moments. A boy's curiosity. A woman's guarded warmth. A man learning how to exist again soon. Daniel wasn't just a customer. He fixed the squeaky hinge on the pantry door. He replaced a flickering bulb without being asked. One afternoon, when the sign outside snapped loose in the wind, he went out and rehung it with steady, calloused hands. When she thanked him, he just shrugged. Guess I like fixing things that still matter. On Friday night, the heater died. Again, Mara sighed. Wrapping herself in her coat as the cafe emptied, Daniel was still there, sipping the last of his coffee. I can take a look, he offered. You sure? It's probably ancient. So am I, he said, standing. 15 minutes later, he had the old furnace open. Tools spread across the floor. Mara watched from the counter. You're good at this. Had to learn, he said, tightening a bolt. When you burn everything down once, you figure out how to build things that last. She frowned. What do you mean? He paused, then said quietly, just life stuff. Something in his tone made her heart twist. When the heater finally roared back to life, she smiled in relief. Okay, that's impressive. You just saved me $300, he smirked. You can pay me in coffee. You already drink enough of it to own stock. Then I'll take a muffin. She laughed, a sound she hadn't realized she'd missed hearing from herself. Later that evening, after closing, she stepped outside with 2 mugs of cocoa. Daniel stood near the porch railing, looking at the lights along Main Street, dim, flickering, familiar. "Here," she said, handing him one. "You look like you could use something sweeter for once." He smiled softly. "What if I don't like sweet things? You just haven't had the right kind." They sipped in silence for a while. Snow fell quietly around them, landing on his coat, her hair, the rail between them. "Finally," she said, "you never talk about where you're from." He looked out toward the sea. "There's not much worth saying." "I don't believe that." He turned to her, eyes dark under the porch light. "Then you're the first." Something shifted in that silence, not loud or dramatic, just real, the kind of moment that doesn't shout but stays. He took a slow breath, looked at the window where Jamie's drawing still hung on the wall, the rainbow house. "You've got a good kid," he said softly. "I know he deserves something steady." She smiled faintly. "We're still working on that." He nodded. "Then maybe that's what I'm supposed to do. Fix steady things." The wind picked up, carrying the faint scent of ocean salt. Somewhere down the street, church bells rang for the evening mass. Mara turned to him. "Why do you keep coming back, Daniel?" He looked at her, snow glinting in his hair like silver. "Because," he said slowly, "it's the first place I've been where I don't feel like I'm disappearing." She didn't answer. Didn't need to. Instead, she handed him another mug and said quietly, "Then don't." By mid-December, the snow stopped falling, but Daniel didn't. He kept coming back. Every morning, same corner seat, same quiet rhythm that had somehow become the heartbeat of Harbor Brew. Mara didn't remember when she'd started expecting him, or when she began brewing an extra pot before sunrise, just in case. It happened the way winter gives way to spring, quietly. Inevitably, that Thursday, the cafe was busier than usual. Locals had started returning, drawn by word of mouth and the smell of real cinnamon rolls again. "Looks like business is coming back," Daniel said, drying mugs behind the counter. Mara glanced at him over her shoulder. "You're acting like you work here," he shrugged. "Maybe I do," she laughed. "You don't even get paid." "I get coffee." "That's fair trade." "Daniel, that's not," he interrupted, grinning. "You're right. I should at least get a muffin." Jamie ran in from school, cheeks red from cold. "Mr. Daniel," he shouted. "Guess what? I got an A on my art project." "That's awesome, kid," Daniel said, giving him a high five. "What did you draw?" "Our cafe," Jamie beamed, "with you and Mom in it." Mara froze mid-step, her heart doing that flutter it always did when her son said things that cut too close to truth. Daniel smiled softly. "You've got talent, buddy." Jamie grinned wider. "I'm gonna hang it right here so everyone sees you." Mara's voice wavered. "That's sweet, honey." Daniel's eyes met hers across the counter, a quiet, steady look that made her forget how to breathe by the end of the week. Daniel had fixed the broken light above the bar, the loose floorboard by the entrance, and the leaky faucet that had driven Mara insane for months. "You know," she said, watching him work, "for someone who claims to be bad at small talk, you're great at fixing things." He smirked. "Talking never fixed much for me. So you just show up and fix people's problems. Only if they let me." She smiled faintly. "You've got a strange way of helping." He looked up, wiping his hands. It's the only way I know how. That night, Mara stayed late to balance the register. Daniel offered to lock up. When she finally turned around, she found him standing by the window, staring out at the dark street. "You okay?" she asked. He hesitated. "Do you ever feel like you don't deserve the quiet moments?" She frowned. "What do you mean?" He looked at her, that distant sadness in his eyes again. "Like you're waiting for the noise to come back." She was quiet for a long time before saying, "All the time." And for once, neither of them had to explain why. Over the next few days, Mara noticed small things. The way Daniel always sat facing the window, never with his back to the door. How he tensed when sirens passed. The subtle scar on his wrist when he rolled up his sleeves. He never talked about the past. But sometimes, when he thought no one was looking, she'd see it, the weight of something unspoken pressing against his calm. Still, she let him be, because she understood what it meant to live with ghosts. One evening, after Jamie had gone home with her sister, Mara and Daniel were closing the shop together. He was repairing the sign outside, the one her dad had built years ago. "You don't have to do that," she called. "It's freezing. I don't mind." She watched him for a moment, tall against the dim streetlight, breath turning to fog. "You ever think about leaving?" she asked softly. He didn't look up. "Every day, so why don't you?" He smiled without humor. "Because for once, it doesn't feel like I have to." When they went back inside, Daniel's jacket brushed against the chair. Something small clinked onto the floor. Mara bent down and picked it up. A cufflink gold engraved with the initials DW. She turned it in her fingers. "Daniel?" He froze. "This looks expensive." "It's nothing," he said too quickly. "DW," she repeated. "That stands for Daniel." "What?" He exhaled slowly. "Ward." Mara blinked. The name hit her like cold water. Ward. As in Ward Enterprises. He didn't answer. Her pulse quickened. "You're that Daniel Ward." He met her eyes, quiet and steady. "I was." Silence fell. The kind that hums, heavy, loaded, too full of everything that can't be said. Finally, she whispered, "You disappeared. Everyone said you ran." He nodded once. "I did. Why?" "Because the truth doesn't matter when the world already decided you're guilty." Mara stared at him, searching for the man she thought she knew, the one who fixed heaters and made cocoa and smiled at her son. But all she could see now was the name that ruined thousands of lives, including her father's retirement fund. Daniel stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't come here to hide, Mara. I came here to remember what it's like to build something that isn't made of lies." Her throat tightened. "And you think fixing coffee machines makes up for what you did?" He looked at her, eyes glassy but calm. "No, but maybe it's a start." She wanted to yell, to tell him to leave, to say that she didn't want him near her or her son. But the words wouldn't come. Asterisk, because when she looked at him, the man standing there, exhausted, broken, trying, she didn't see a billionaire or a fugitive. She saw someone who, like her, was just trying to be okay. He reached for his coat. "I'll stay away, if that's what you want." Mara swallowed hard. "I didn't say that." He stopped, eyes searching hers. "Then what are you saying?" She hesitated, then said softly, "I'm saying, I don't know yet. The storm that night wasn't made of snow. It was whispers, by morning. Everyone in Seabrook had heard. Daniel Ward was back. Not the man who fixed heaters. Not the quiet stranger who drank black coffee. But the fallen billionaire whose company's collapse had burned half the coast's savings, including Mara's father's. Mara stood behind the counter, staring at the morning paper someone had left on the stool. The headline read, "Ward Air vanished 3 years ago, sightings reported in Oregon." Daniel walked in seconds later, as if nothing had changed. The bell above the door rang softly, but it sounded different now, sharper, heavier. He froze when he saw the paper. Their eyes met across the counter, the space between them filled with everything unsaid. "You knew this would happen," Mara said quietly. "Yes, and you still stayed." "I told you." "I'm done running," she exhaled sharply. "You don't get to say that, Daniel. Not after what people lost, what we lost." He didn't flinch. "I know, and I can't fix that." Her voice cracked. "My father lost his pension because of your company." He looked down. "Then I owe you more than I can ever repay." For a long time, the only sound was the hiss of the espresso machine. Finally, Mara whispered, "Why come here? Why my cafe?" He lifted his gaze. "I didn't know it was yours." "Bullshit." "Mara," she slammed the cup down. "You expect me to believe this is coincidence." "I didn't know," he said again, slower this time. "Not until I saw the name on the sign. Then why didn't you leave?" He took a breath that sounded like it hurt, because it felt like the first place that didn't hate me just for existing. A silence heavier than anger filled the space. Then the door opened. A man in a heavy coat stepped in, early 40s. Camera slung over his shoulder, press badge visible in his pocket. He ordered a coffee, but his eyes never left Daniel. Mara's heart sank. She recognized that look, a story waiting to explode. Daniel noticed too. He set his cup down slowly. "Reporter?" she murmured. He nodded once. "They always find me, eventually." The reporter finally spoke, his tone casual but cold. "Daniel Ward, quite the place you've chosen to disappear. You planning a comeback?" Daniel didn't answer. The man smirked. "You know, people are still looking for answers. Your father left a lot behind when he enough," Daniel said quietly. Mara tensed. "Daniel, don't." But the reporter leaned closer. "You vanished the night before the indictment hearing. You left your employees, your investors." Daniel's voice was steady, but his hands shook. "I didn't steal from anyone." The man scoffed. "Then who did?" Daniel hesitated. Then, softly, "My father." The words hung in the air like frost. The reporter blinked, almost disappointed. "You expect anyone to believe that?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "I don't care who believes me. I'm not here to prove anything." The man laughed, finishing his coffee. "Well, maybe the truth doesn't matter, but stories do. And this one just found its ending." He left without another word. The bell chimed as the door shut, and the silence that followed felt like a wound reopening. Mara finally spoke, her voice thin. "So that's your truth. You're here to run from what your father did." He looked at her, eyes glassy. "I'm here to remember who I was before I tried to be him." Her anger faltered. "You think hiding in a small town makes you different?" "No," he said softly. "But fixing a broken heater for someone who didn't know my name that did." She swallowed hard. "You should have told me." "I wanted to," he admitted, "every day. But I didn't want you to look at me the way you are right now." For the first time, Mara saw something break in him. Not pride, not ego, but guilt. The kind that lived in bones. She closed her eyes, whispering, "You hurt people, Daniel. Even if it wasn't your fault." He nodded. "I know, that's why I stayed. Because I need to learn what it means to make something right, even if it's just a coffee shop." Her voice was barely audible. "You can't undo the past with kindness." He stepped closer. "Maybe not. But maybe I can start with truth." The bell above the door jingled again. Jamie ran in, holding a snow globe. "Mum." "Mr. Daniel, look. It's snowing inside." He shook the globe, and tiny flakes swelled over a miniature house under glass. Mara froze. The symbolism hit too deep. A world small, fragile, trapped between what once was and what still could be. Daniel knelt, smiling faintly. "That's beautiful, Jamie." "It's magic," Jamie said proudly. "You can start the snow any time you want." Daniel's eyes softened. "Yeah, maybe you can." When Jamie went to the back room, Mara stood there, holding her breath. Daniel looked at her. "I'll leave if you want me to." She shook her head slowly. "No, don't run again. Just don't lie." He exhaled, relief and grief mixing in one quiet sound. "I won't," he said. "Not anymore." Outside, the first snow of January began to fall. Inside, for the first time since everything came crashing down, Daniel didn't feel like hiding. And for Mara, for all her anger, her fear, her doubt, she couldn't ignore the one truth she felt in her chest. Sometimes, the people who break us are the only ones who know how to help us heal. By Monday, the town had turned. It wasn't loud or cruel at first. It started in whispers. Mara could feel it in the way people stopped talking when she walked into the bakery, or how neighbors looked away just a little too. Slowly, when she passed, Seabrook had always been a place that prided itself on knowing everyone. Now it knew too much. She flipped the cafe sign to open that morning and found only 2 regulars waiting. By noon, they'd gone, and no one else came. Even the scent of cinnamon and coffee couldn't drown the tension. Daniel stood near the back, quietly wiping the counter that didn't need wiping. "You don't have to stay," she said finally. He didn't look up. "I told you. I'm not running. People are talking, Daniel. They're saying, I know what they're saying." She sighed, rubbing her temple. "It's not just about you. It's about Jamie, about me. This cafe is all we have." He nodded slowly. "Then let me help protect it." She laughed bitterly. "You can't protect me from a rumor." He looked up then, eyes calm but sharp. "No, but I can show them who I really am." Later that afternoon, Jamie came home early from school. He slammed the door and threw his backpack down, face red with tears. "Hey." Mara knelt. "What happened?" The boy sniffled. "Some kids. They said Mr. Daniel's a bad guy. That he stole money and went to jail. They said Mom's stupid for trusting him." Her heart clenched. Before she could speak, Daniel stepped out from the kitchen doorway. "Jamie," he said softly. "Come here." Jamie wiped his nose. "Is it true?" Daniel knelt, looking him in the eye. "Some of it, but not the part about stealing or hurting people." "Then why do they hate you?" Daniel swallowed. "Because I made mistakes. Because I didn't stop something bad when I should have." Jamie frowned, like when you see someone cheat and you don't tell the teacher. Daniel smiled sadly. "Yeah, kind of like that. and it cost a lot of people something they cared about. Jamie thought about it, then said simply, "But you fixed our heater." Daniel blinked, surprised. "Yeah, I guess I did." "Then you're not a bad guy," the boy declared. "Bad guys don't fix heaters." That night, Mara couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, watching snow drift under the streetlight, her mind a storm of guilt and confusion. Daniel sat on the porch, quiet, lost in thought. She opened the door, stepping out with 2 mugs of cocoa. "Jamie's tough," she said softly. "He takes after my dad." Daniel smiled faintly. "Your dad would have liked him. He would have liked you too," she said before realizing it, and immediately regretted how true it sounded. Daniel looked at her. Would he, after what happened to him? She didn't answer. Instead, she asked, "What really happened, Daniel?" Not the version on the papers, not the gossip. He took a long breath, exhaling a truth that had waited too long. "My father built Ward Enterprises from nothing. He was brilliant, ruthless, and I spent my life trying to be like him. But when the company started falling apart, I found out he'd been using retirement funds to keep it afloat. He said it was temporary, that he'd pay it all back." Daniel stared into the snow. "When I threatened to expose him, he told me the world wouldn't believe me, that I'd destroy the family name. So I stayed quiet. And then the crash came." Mara's throat tightened. "And he let everyone blame you." He nodded once. "Because I signed the last documents. I thought I was saving people. I was saving him." Silence fell, only the soft hum of wind and old guilt between them. "Finally," she whispered, "you could have cleared your name." He looked at her, eyes hollow but honest. "At what cost? I already lost everything that mattered. Maybe I needed to learn how to live without it." Mara stared at him, the man everyone called a villain, sitting barefoot in the snow, like someone trying to feel something real again. "Why tell me all this?" she asked quietly. "Because you deserve the truth, and because Jamie deserves to know what kind of man sits at his mother's counter every morning." She wanted to stay angry. She wanted to protect herself. But somewhere beneath the hurt, she felt something else, the first flicker of understanding. A knock on the door broke the moment. Mara froze. Daniel stood up instantly, instinct sharp. A shadow moved behind the frosted glass. He opened the door and found a woman standing there, holding a press badge. "I'm looking for Daniel Ward," she said calmly. "My name's Elise Carter. I'm not here for a story. I'm here because your father's lawyers just reopened the case." Daniel's blood ran cold. Mara's mug slipped slightly in her hand. Elise continued, "They want you to testify. It's your word against what's left of his estate." He exhaled shakily. "And if I don't, then the lie becomes history." After she left, Mara looked at him and saw the old fear again. "You can't keep hiding," she whispered. He nodded slowly. "I know, I just don't know if I'm ready to be hated again." She stepped closer. "Then don't face it alone." He stared at her, as if trying to believe what he just heard. "Mara, don't thank me," she cut in softly. "Just tell the truth. This time, don't let silence win." Outside, the snow had stopped. Inside, something else was beginning. Not forgiveness yet, but courage. To people, both tired of running, both still afraid, standing side by side, finally choosing honesty over comfort. And for the first time in 3 years, Daniel Ward didn't feel like a ghost. He felt human again. The next morning, Seabrook woke to headlines. Disgraced CEO Daniel Ward spotted in Oregon, legal reopening imminent. The story spread faster than frost over glass. Customers stopped coming. Suppliers delayed deliveries. Even the mailman hesitated before stepping inside. It was like the town had turned cold overnight, and the cafe along with it. Mara stood behind the counter, staring at the empty tables. She hadn't seen Daniel since the night before. Jamie tugged her sleeve. "Mum, are we in trouble?" She forced a smile. "No, honey." "Why would we be?" "Because people at school said we're helping a bad guy." Her throat tightened. "Don't listen to them. But are we?" he asked softly. She looked at him, really looked. Her son's eyes, so open, so pure, demanding an answer she wasn't sure she had. She knelt. "We're helping someone tell the truth. And sometimes that's harder than being good." Jamie frowned, confused but trusting. "Okay, then I'll help too." The door opened. Daniel stood there, unshaven, exhausted, still wearing the same jacket from last night. He looked like a man halfway between leaving and staying. Mara's heart clenched. "You look like hell." "I feel worse. Coffee." He hesitated. "I don't deserve that." "Then you probably need it more." He smiled faintly, a fragile, human smile, and took the cup. They sat in silence for a long while. The only sound, the gentle hum of the old heater he'd fixed weeks ago. Finally, Daniel said quietly, "Elise called. The court date's in 3 weeks." Mara's fingers tightened on the mug. "Are you going?" "I should," he said. "But going means putting a spotlight back on everyone I've hurt. Not going means you let the lie win." He sighed. "You sound like Elise. I sound like someone who's tired of hiding." He looked at her, eyes weary. "You don't understand what it's like to have your name become poison." Her jaw tightened. "You think I don't? My dad lost everything because of that poison." Silence. Then, quietly, she added, "But maybe this is how we end it, by telling the truth, even if it hurts." The doorbell chimed again. Elise stepped in, the reporter's calm composure masking urgency. "Daniel," she said, "you need to make a statement before the media does. If you don't, they'll write your story for you again." He rubbed his temple. "I'm done with microphones." "This isn't about microphones," she said firmly. "It's about ownership. For once, you get to decide how your name is remembered." Mara spoke softly. "She's right." Daniel looked between them, 2 women, both braver than he'd ever been, and felt something shift inside. "All right," he said finally. "I'll do it. But not for them. For me." They spent the afternoon in the back office, drafting statements, revisiting painful documents, piecing together the truth brick by brick. Mara watched him, realizing just how much weight he carried alone. Every time he signed a paper, his hand trembled slightly. Every number, every file was a ghost he'd buried at one point. He looked up and said softly, "You should hate me for dragging you into this." She shook her head. "I don't hate you. I just wish you'd trusted me sooner." He exhaled. "I didn't think I deserved that kind of trust." "Then maybe this is where you start." As evening settled, Daniel walked Mara home. The town felt different now, colder, smaller. Every porch light a silent accusation. Halfway down the street, she stopped. "Daniel," she said, "what if this ruins you again?" He smiled faintly. "Then at least this time, it'll be for the truth." She wanted to say something, to stop him, to warn him, to hold him, but before she could, her phone buzzed, an unknown number. She answered, "Mara Bennett. Yes. This is Seabrook Bank. I'm calling about your loan. We've had to reevaluate your account due to current circumstances." Her pulse spiked. What circumstances? Association with a public legal case. Until further review, your renewal is on hold. Her voice caught. That can't be. I've paid every ma'am. It's procedural. The line went dead. She stood frozen, phone still in her hand. Daniel turned. What happened? She swallowed hard. They froze my loan. The cafe, I could lose it. His face went pale. Because of me? No, she said quickly. Because of them. Because people believe headlines. He shook his head. No, Mara. This is exactly what I do. I ruin things for people who don't deserve it. Stop, she said sharply. You don't get to decide what I deserve. Her eyes filled with tears. You don't get to walk away again. He stared at her, torn, desperate, terrified. Finally, he said quietly, "Then tell me what to do." She stepped closer, voice trembling. Stand up. Tell the truth. And don't you dare let this town turn you into a ghost again. He nodded slowly, something resolute breaking through the fog. I will, he said. Not for me. For you? The next morning, the sun rose over Seabrook for the first time in days. Light spilled through the cafe windows, catching dust motes like tiny stars. Mara unlocked the door, same as always, and waiting outside, coat buttoned. Eyes steady, was Daniel Ward. He looked different. Not guilty, not lost. Just a man ready to be seen again. Part 4, Segment 1. The Weight of Truth, the press, came 3 days later. They always do. Cars lined the quiet street of Seabrook like vultures, circling something still breathing. Reporters camped outside Harbour Brew, lenses pointed at the sign as if it could confess. Mara stood behind the counter, trying to steady her hands as she poured coffee. Daniel stood beside her, not hiding, not flinching, just there. Outside, camera flashes strobed like lightning. You sure you want to do this? She asked quietly. He nodded. If I don't now, I never will. Elise Carter, the reporter who had become his unlikely ally, stood by the door with the recorder. This is your chance to set the record straight, she said. But remember, they're not here to forgive you. They're here to watch you bleed. Daniel gave a faint smile. Then I better make it worth their time. Mara wanted to tell him to stop, to just walk away, to stay in their small bubble of quiet mornings and cocoa. But she knew that would be a lie, and she'd had enough of lies. The press conference took place outside the cafe. Half the town gathered, whispering like ghosts in daylight. Daniel stepped forward, coat buttoned, hands trembling only slightly. Elise adjusted the mic. He looked out over the crowd, faces familiar and foreign, hostile and curious, and took a slow breath. My name, he began, is Daniel Ward. 3 years ago, I disappeared because I thought it would make things easier. For me, for all of you. I was wrong. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I didn't steal your money, he continued, but I did sign the papers that allowed my father to move it. I told myself it was temporary, that I was protecting the company. The truth is, I was protecting a man I couldn't stop loving, even when he was wrong. A flash went off. Another reporter shouted, So, you're saying your father was guilty? Daniel didn't flinch. I'm saying I was, Because I stayed silent when I should have spoken. He paused, his gaze finding Mara at the edge of the crowd, her eyes steady, her presence the only thing keeping him from falling apart. You can keep calling me a thief, a coward, a traitor. Maybe I deserve all that. But I came here to tell you that the truth doesn't fix what it breaks. It just stops the breaking from spreading. The street fell utterly silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Then Daniel said softly, I'm not here to rebuild Ward Enterprises. I'm here to rebuild myself. And with that, he stepped away from the mic. No applause. No forgiveness. Just quiet. Mara met him halfway down the street. You did good, she whispered. He shook his head. I did honest. That's better, she said. But honesty has a cost. By that evening, Seabrook Bank officially withdrew the Café's renewal loan. Suppliers demanded upfront payment. A handful of locals refused to come in at all when Mara received the final notice. She sat at the counter long after closing, staring at the words, account terminated. Jamie slept in the back room, curled under his jacket. Daniel sat across from her, silent. This place was my dad's dream, she said softly. It's all I have left of him. He swallowed hard. Then we'll fight for it. How? She asked bitterly. You think one speech changes anything? No, he said, but maybe it changes someone. The next morning, someone left a note on the cafe door. I was one of your father's employees. Lost everything when Ward went down. Watched your speech. You were right. Truth doesn't fix what it breaks, but it stopped me from hating you. Thank you. There was no name, no return address. Just that Mara stared at it for a long time. Then she smiled, not because it fixed anything, but because it reminded her that change, like forgiveness, starts small. That afternoon, a new kind of silence settled in the cafe not empty. Waiting, Daniel was at the counter, sanding the old sign he'd repaired months ago. Mara watched him, realizing how much had changed since the day he first walked in, a stranger with snow on his coat and guilt in his eyes. Now he looked different, still burdened, still uncertain, but alive in a way he hadn't been. You don't have to stay, she said softly. He looked up. I know, but I want to. She smiled faintly. You sure about that? This town isn't exactly kind. I'm not staying for the town. Her heart stuttered. Then for what? He met her eyes. For the place that finally feels like home. Later that night, as Mara locked up, a knock came at the door. A man stood outside, well-dressed, expensive shoes, expression unreadable. Mrs. Bennett, he asked. I represent Ward Enterprises' legal team. Daniel froze. The man continued, your cafe sits on property that was once under Ward Holdings. The estate wants to reclaim its assets as part of the case. Mara's blood ran cold. You're saying that unless you can produce a valid lease renewal by next month, the building reverts to corporate ownership. He handed her a folder. Have a good evening. The door shut. Daniel's voice was a whisper. Mara. She stared at the folder like it was burning through her hands. So that's it, she said quietly. Your truth takes everything. He stepped closer. Then I'll fight them. I'll fix this. Her eyes glistened. You can't fix everything, Daniel. I can try. And what if trying just breaks more? She asked, voice shaking. He had no answer, only silence. The next few weeks were brutal. Every morning, Mara opened the cafe, knowing it could be the last. Every evening, Daniel stayed after closing, fixing shelves, tightening bolts, repainting the walls, anything to keep the place standing just a little longer. Bills stacked like snowdrifts. The smiles faded, but the coffee still brewed. Because sometimes that's all you can do. Keep brewing even when the heat's almost gone. Jamie felt it too. He stopped asking for treats after school. He'd sit at a corner table, drawing pictures of the cafe surrounded by little hearts, labeling it home. One night, he came up to Daniel, holding a sketch. In it, the three of them stood behind the counter, smiling. "It's us," Jamie said proudly. Daniel knelt, throat tight. "It's perfect," Jamie frowned. "Mum cries sometimes when she thinks I'm asleep." Daniel looked away. "She's scared. Grown-ups cry when they don't know what's next." Jamie tilted his head. "You'll fix it, right? Like the heater." Daniel hesitated, the weight of that innocent faith heavier than any debt. "I'll try," he said quietly. "I promise I'll try." That night, Mara found him sitting alone outside the cafe, head in his hands. The snow had melted. Rain had taken its place, cold, steady, unending. "You don't have to stay out here," she said softly. He didn't look up. "I don't know what else to do. Every time I try to fix something, it just breaks again." "Then maybe stop fixing," she said, sitting beside him. "Start living." He gave a humorless laugh. "Living's expensive. So is running," she said. "Trust me. I've done both." He turned to her, really seeing her, the exhaustion, the fire, the quiet faith that refused to die. "I ruined your life," he whispered. She shook her head. "No, my life was already broken. You just showed up before it drowned me." They sat in silence as rain tapped against the awning. Finally, Mara said, "You know what hurts the most? It's not losing the cafe. It's that I started to believe again. In something. In you." Daniel's voice was hoarse. "Then believe in this, that I'm not leaving." She looked at him, eyes searching for a lie and finding none. "Why?" She whispered. "Why stay when it hurts so much?" "Because leaving never stopped the hurt," he said. "It just delayed it." The next day, they met with the bank representative. The decision was final, without the renewal. The cafe would be repossessed in 2 weeks. Mara signed the papers with shaking hands, her father's handwriting still faintly visible on the old lease copy. The ink faded, but not forgotten. When it was over, she walked out into the cold afternoon and leaned against the wall, trying not to break. Daniel followed, silent. "Finally," she said, "it's over." He shook his head. "No, it's just changing." She laughed bitterly. "That's what people say when they don't know what to do." "Maybe," he said softly, "but maybe change is what this place needed." That evening, they opened the cafe one last time. The town came, not out of pity, but memory. People who hadn't spoken in months stopped by Mrs. Lane with her apple pie, old Mr. Harris with a harmonica. Even the pastor from St. Luke's ordered a coffee to go and slipped an envelope into the tip jar. Inside it was a note. "Forgiveness is not forgetting. It's choosing not to let the past own you." And $500 in cash. Mara stared at it, tears blurring the words. Daniel stood beside her, hand resting gently over hers. When they closed that night, the cafe was quieter than it had ever been. Jamie was asleep in the back room again. Mara and Daniel sat at the counter, 2 mugs between them, both untouched. What happens now? She whispered. Daniel stared at the dark street outside. I testify next week. After that, I don't know, she nodded slowly. And if they drag you through it again, he looked at her. Then I'll keep standing, because this time I'm not standing alone. Her lips trembled. You mean that? He nodded. I meant it the first day I walked in here and didn't leave. She smiled, small, tired, real. You really are stubborn. He smiled back. You have no idea. Later, after Daniel left, Mara walked round the cafe one last time. Her fingers traced the walls her father built, the tables Daniel repaired, the drawings Jamie taped up, each thing broken. Fixed, loved again. She turned off the lights, whispering into the dark. Maybe that's all home ever was, something you keep fixing because it's worth it. Outside, under the streetlight, Daniel stood alone, looking up at the flickering Harbour Brew sign. It buzzed once, then went dark, the light finally giving out after all these years. He smiled sadly. Then he whispered, I'll fix it tomorrow. And for the first time, Mara believed him. The courtroom was colder than Daniel expected. Not in temperature, in air. The kind of chill that came from judgment before words. Reporters filled the benches. Camera flashes painted him in white light and shadow, turning a man into a headline once more. Daniel Ward, the fallen son, the vanishing heir, the one who ran, but this time he didn't lower his head. Mara sat in the back row, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Jamie stayed home with her sister, but before she left, he'd whispered, Tell Mr. Daniel to be brave. So she did, silently, with her eyes, when he turned and found her. The judge entered. Court is now in session. People versus Ward Enterprises Estate. Daniel's attorney, a quiet man with kind eyes, leaned in. You don't owe them a performance, Daniel. Just the truth. Daniel nodded. That's all I have left. The opposing lawyer, sharp and rehearsed, began first. Mr. Ward, you claim your father orchestrated the embezzlement of retirement funds that left hundreds bankrupt. Yet you signed the final authorization. Isn't that correct? Yes, Daniel said calmly. So, legally, you're responsible. I am, the courtroom murmured. Mara's heart clenched. The lawyer smirked. So why are we here? Are you seeking sympathy? No, Daniel said. Accountability. The man paused, caught off guard. You're admitting guilt. Daniel shook his head. No, I'm admitting I failed to stop it. I knew what he was doing. I thought I could control it. I thought silence was loyalty. I was wrong. Then why didn't you come forward 3 years ago? Daniel hesitated, then said, quietly, because I loved him. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I loved the man who built everything. I thought if I exposed him, I'd destroy him. I didn't realize he'd already destroyed himself. The lawyer leaned closer. And you expect this court to believe that love excuses fraud? Daniel's jaw tensed. No, I'm saying love blinded me to truth, and I'm here to stop pretending it didn't. The lawyer frowned, flipping papers. You lost billions. You hid for years. You show up in a coffee shop like a penitent monk, and now you want redemption. Daniel met his eyes, voice steady. I don't want redemption. I want responsibility. Mara couldn't breathe. Every word he said cut through her, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. The lawyer smirked. You signed You vanished. You watched people suffer. Why should anyone believe you're not just rewriting your story to feel better about yourself? Daniel looked at him, really looked, and said, "Because I'm not the one rewriting it. They are, the people I hurt. The woman who lost her father's cafe. The boy who still believes I can fix things. If they can see who I am now, even for a moment, then maybe that's enough." Silence fell. Even the judge lowered her pen. When it was over, Daniel stepped down from the stand. He didn't look back at the cameras or the whispers or the flashbulbs. He looked at Mara. She stood, her eyes glistening. And for a moment, the noise faded. She mouthed, "You did it." He gave the faintest smile. "We did." Hours later, the judge's verdict came. Daniel Ward was cleared of criminal fraud. The court found that his father had acted alone, manipulating signatures through falsified records, but the verdict came with a line that hurt almost as much. All personal and corporate assets tied to Ward Enterprises remain forfeited. He was innocent, but bankrupt. Free, but stripped of everything left from his old life. Outside, the sky was overcast, neither bright nor dark, just in between. Mara waited on the courthouse steps. When he walked out, she didn't say a word. She just stepped forward, took his hand, and said quietly, "You told the truth." He nodded. "It cost everything." She smiled faintly. "Then it was worth it." They walked to the edge of the parking lot. Reporters shouted his name, but he didn't turn back. "Where will you go now?" she asked. He looked at her. "Home, I think." She frowned. "Where's that?" He smiled softly. "Wherever the coffee's still warm." That night, as rain began to fall over Seabrook again, Daniel sat at the same table where it all began. The cafe was empty, lights dimmed. He ran a hand over the counter, the place that saved him when the world forgot his name. Mara stood beside him, quiet. He said softly, "I used to think truth was a punishment. Turns out it's a beginning." She nodded. "Then let's start there." The day after the verdict, Seabrook felt different. Not louder, not kinder, just quieter. The kind of quiet that follows a storm. The story made national news for about 12 hours, then disappeared, replaced by newer scandals and fresher tragedies. But in the small town by the sea, where truth had broken open like the tide, things didn't go back to normal, they went forward. Mara sat in the empty cafe, surrounded by boxes. The eviction notice still hung on the counter, "Vacate by end of week." The words didn't sting anymore. They were just there. Jamie played by the window, stacking sugar packets like building blocks. Daniel walked in quietly, carrying 2 steaming cups. "I brought coffee," he said. "From the gas station?" "It's terrible," Mara smiled weakly. "You always did have expensive taste." "Guess I'm learning humility. Guess we both are." They sat together in silence. The kind of silence that didn't hurt anymore. "You don't have to stay," she said softly. He looked around at the half-empty shelves, the fading paint, the echoes of laughter that used to fill the room. "I do," he said, "because this is where I started telling the truth." She studied him, thinner, older, maybe freer. "You really have nothing left, do you?" He smiled faintly. "Just this coffee, and maybe something worth rebuilding." That evening, the doorbell chimed. It was Mrs. Lane, the one with the apple pies. Behind her stood half the town, old Mr. Harris, the pastor, the high school kids who once laughed at Jamie, even the mailman. "We heard what happened," Mrs. Lane said. Figured it's time someone helped the people who kept helping everyone else. Mara blinked. I don't understand. The pastor smiled. We're not here for charity. We're here for community. You gave us warmth when we forgot what it felt like. He held out a folded envelope. Inside were donations, small bills, handwritten notes, recipes, coupons, even IOUs. Mara's hands shook. I can't accept this. Daniel placed his hand gently over hers. Yes, you can. He turned to the crowd. You don't know what this means. Mrs. Lane wiped a tear. Sure we do. It means Seabrook doesn't let good people disappear. That night, they stayed long after everyone had gone. Jamie was asleep again in the back. A blanket tucked around him, Mara stood by the window, watching the streetlights flicker over wet pavement. Daniel joined her, a quiet warmth beside her shoulder. You know, she said softly, my dad used to say the cafe wasn't really about coffee. It was about people. Daniel smiled. He was right. Then maybe we keep it that way. How? She turned to him, eyes bright. We start smaller. No fancy signs. No investors. Just hands, heart, and whoever shows up. 2 weeks later, the sign above the door changed. No longer Harbor Brew, just Second Cup. Mara laughed when Daniel hung it up, crooked. He grinned. It's not perfect. It's honest, she said. And somehow that was enough. The reopening was simple. A few tables, one working espresso machine, a jar for tips. But people came. Kids drew chalk art on the sidewalk. Old men played chess by the window. And for the first time in months, laughter filled the air again. Later that afternoon, Jamie ran up holding a flyer. Mum, they're writing about us in the paper. Mara smiled, reading the headline. Former CEO and single mum reopen Calf Brewing Hope in Seabrook. Daniel read over her shoulder and chuckled. They make it sound heroic. She looked at him. It kind of is. As the sun dipped into the ocean, painting the street gold, Daniel leaned against the doorframe, watching Mara close the register. You know, he said, I spent my whole life thinking legacy was about names on buildings. She looked up. And now, he smiled softly, now I think it's about who keeps the lights on when the world stops watching. She tilted her head. So, are you planning to keep helping me fix lights forever? He grinned. Only if you keep burning them out. They both laughed, the kind of laugh that sounded like home. When they finally locked up, Daniel reached for the switch. The lights flickered once, twice, and stayed on. Mara smiled. Guess you really did fix it. He looked at her, not alone, and for the first time, they both believed it. 1 year later, Seabrook smelled like coffee and salt again. The sign outside Second Cup was a little faded, a little crooked, and completely perfect. Every morning, the same rhythm returned. The hum of the grinder, Jamie's laughter echoing from the back, and Daniel's voice calling out orders that never sounded like orders at all. Life had settled into something simple, something real, and in that simplicity, they'd found peace. Mara wiped the counter, glancing at Daniel as he chatted with a group of high schoolers by the window. He was teaching them how to calculate profit margins on napkins, turning math into something human. You should be a teacher, she said when they left. He smiled. Funny you say that. The community college called yesterday. They want me to teach a course next semester. Her eyes lit up. That's amazing. Yeah, he said softly. It's small, But it's honest work. That's what we do best, she teased. He looked at her, something warm in his gaze. Guess so. The cafe had become more than a place again. Local artists displayed their paintings on the walls. Jamie's class sold cookies to fund their science fair. Every week, someone brought flowers for the window. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't rich. But it was alive, built on second chances, one cup at a time. One afternoon, Daniel was closing out the register when the bell above the door rang. A man in a tailored suit stepped in, confident, polished, out of place. "Mr. Ward," he said. Daniel stiffened. "You've got the wrong person." The man smiled politely. "I don't think I do. I represent the board of North Atlantic Investments. They're launching a new division and they'd like you to lead it." Daniel blinked. "Why?" "Because your testimony changed how people saw corporate ethics. They want someone who understands the cost of integrity." Mara froze mid-step, heart sinking that the man continued. "It's in New York. Full relocation package. Full salary. You'd be back where you belong." Silence filled the room. The kind that comes only when two worlds collide. Daniel glanced at Mara. Then at the cafe, the chalkboard with Jamie's doodles, the mismatched mugs, the crooked sign outside. "I don't know if that's where I belong anymore," he said finally. The man chuckled. "Mr. Ward, this is a chance to rebuild your legacy." Daniel smiled faintly. "I already did." But the words lingered, heavy, uncertain. That night, he sat outside the cafe long after closing. The letter of offer still unopened beside him. Mara came out with 2 cups of cocoa. "You didn't tell me," she said. "I didn't know how. You're thinking about it." He looked at her. "I'd be lying if I said no." She nodded slowly. "Then tell me what you'd miss most if you went." He stared at the street, at the flickering lamplight, at the window where Jamie's newest drawing hung, the 3 of them behind the counter. "Smiling, everything," he said quietly. "But sometimes, everything isn't enough." She sat beside him. "You spent years running from who you were," she said softly. "Don't start running from who you've become." He exhaled, staring down at the letter. "It's just hard to know which version's the real one." Mara looked at him. "The real one's the man who stayed when everyone else left." Inside, Jamie stirred in his sleep. Daniel glanced through the window, watching the boy dream peacefully under the soft glow of the string lights. A memory flashed his father's boardroom, full of voices, power, greed. Then this place, full of quiet and warmth. He finally said, "You ever wonder if we're meant for more?" She smiled. "I think more isn't about how big your life is. It's about how true it feels when you wake up in it." He chuckled softly. "You're full of lines that should be on coffee mugs. I'll put it on one tomorrow." As the night deepened, rain began to fall. Daniel stood, walking toward the edge of the porch. "New York feels like another lifetime," he murmured. It was Mara said. "This one's yours now." He looked back at her, and for the first time in years, the decision didn't scare him. "I think you're right," he said, "but I should still go, at least to say goodbye." Her breath caught. "You're leaving." "Just for a few days," he said gently, "to make peace with the past. Then I'll come home." New York was louder than he remembered. The skyline hadn't changed, sharp, proud, alive, but Daniel had. Where the city once felt like power, now it just felt hollow. He walked through the revolving doors of the old Ward Enterprises building. the marble floor gleaming like it was still 2019. The receptionist froze when she saw him. "Mr. Ward." He smiled faintly. Just Daniel now. The boardroom hadn't aged a day. Same long glass table, same view of the river, same ghost of a father in every reflection. Daniel stood at the head of the table, resting his hands where his father once stood. For years, this room had owned him. Now, it felt small. He took a deep breath. "I forgive you," he whispered to the empty chair. "Not for what you did, but for who I became trying to be you." He pulled from his coat pocket the one thing he'd brought from Seabrook, a paper cup from Second Cup, Jamie's doodle still faint on its side. He set it on the table. "Here's to better legacies," he said softly. Then he turned and walked out, leaving the past behind in fluorescent light. When he returned to Seabrook 3 days later, the sky was grey with the promise of snow. Mara was outside the cafe, hanging a wreath on the door. Jamie chased snowflakes nearby, bundled in a red scarf. Daniel stopped at the end of the street, just watching the way he had the first day he arrived. Only now, the ache in his chest was gone. He walked up slowly. "You came back," Mara said, half smiling, half not believing. "I told you I would." She crossed her arms, pretending to scold. "You were gone long enough to make me think otherwise." He grinned. "You doubted me. I've learned not to bet against people who fix heaters." He handed her something, the paper cup, clean and empty, the faint ink still showing Jamie's tiny drawings. "What's this?" she asked. "Closure," he said, "and a reminder don't ever stop brewing." She smiled, brushing her thumb over the fading doodle. "I won't. Not as long as you keep showing up for coffee." He looked around at the lights, at the chalkboard, at the crooked sign still hanging proudly. "This place looks the same," he said softly. "No," she replied. "It looks loved." Inside, the cafe was bustling, laughter, chatter, the smell of cinnamon and cocoa. The kind of life you can't buy, only build. Jamie ran up. "Mr. Daniel?" "You missed Second Cup Day." Daniel knelt, smiling. "I'll need a rain check." Jamie grinned. "You can pay with cocoa. Deal." Later that night, after the last customer left, Mara poured the final 2 cups. They sat by the window, watching snow fall again, just like the first night they met Daisy Vu. Daniel said softly. "Full circle," she corrected. He nodded, lifting his cup. "To second chances." She clinked hers gently against his. "To the people who take them." Outside, the wind whispered against the glass, carrying the smell of salt and winter. The world hadn't changed, but they had. Mara glanced at him, eyes warm. "So, what now?" Daniel smiled. "Now, we keep the lights on." As they closed up, Daniel reached for the switch. The sign outside flickered once, twice, and stayed bright. Mara looked at him, a quiet laugh escaping. "You fixed it again." He looked at her, the woman who turned his exile into home, and said simply, "No, we did." Then he flipped the sign from open to closed. And for the first time in years, it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like peace.